In December of 1949, an elderly man named James Tedford took a seat on an 8-hour bus ride destined for his home in Bennington, Vermont. Many witnesses on the bus stated they saw him sleeping peacefully as the bus departed for its final stop. But when the bus reached its final destination, James never stepped off the bus. But he wasn't on the bus either. James Tedford just vanished. How is that possible? Anything is possible in the Bennington Triangle. Vermont. Not a state you hear about very often. If you're like me, the only thing you know about Vermont is that it's the location of the Stratford Inn in the TV show Newhart.
I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl. That's my other brother Daryl.
Little did I know that Vermont is the home of something called the Bennington Triangle, so named by paranormal author and New Englander himself, Joseph A. Citro, to describe the rough outline of weirdness that is pretty much centered around Glastenbury Mountain in the Green Mountains of Vermont. For the paranormally uninitiated, it's a beautiful setting, perfect for fishing and hunting and hiking, with the Appalachian Trail and a trail called the Long Trail, which is a hiking trail running the entire length of Vermont, north to south, joining up together, running straight through the Green Mountains for the entire southern half of Vermont until the Appalachian Trail curves east into New Hampshire. Mr. Citro was mostly referring to a string of missing 411-style disappearances that happened in the area. Link in the description to our video on David Paulides' missing 411 phenomena. But anyone who lives in the area can tell you there's way more going on there than just disappearing people. And this is one of those places that kind of remind me of Dudleytown. Also a link in the description, in that it seems to have been trouble from the very start. So the area we are talking about is roughly between the cities of Bennington, Wilmington, and Manchester. Basically the area surrounding the lower portion of the Green Mountains, though some people would say it stretches even further north than that to encompass pretty much the whole of the Green Mountain range. The first clue that there might be an issue with the area is that the Algonquin Native Americans wouldn't go up those mountains. The only time they set foot up there was to bury their dead. They've been in the area for 10,000 years, so they might have a clue. To them, it was the place where the four winds came together, making it a cursed and dangerous place. Why don't we ever pay attention to Native American curses? And apparently, if you're standing on the top of Glastenbury Mountain, the winds can really be unpredictable and can hit you from different directions and become disorienting. But it's not just the winds that the Indians were avoiding. It was the man-eating rock. Legend tells of a large boulder somewhere on the top of the mountain that looks like any other rock. But should you make the mistake of standing or sitting on it, it'll just swallow you up. Poof! You're gone. But since we never seemed to listen to the natives, early settlers to the area came, saw the endless supply of wood for the booming timber industry, and named their new town Glastenbury. Now, between the logging industry and the charcoal industry, Glastenbury was a booming little place. If you can call a peak population of 241 people booming. From the very beginning, there were reports of strange lights and thunderbirds in the skies, wild men and ghosts in the woods, and strange noises and obnoxious odors in the air. That's a new one. Business kept on chugging away, but they had a problem getting the wood down from the mountain. Solution? The steepest railroad line ever built, with a rise of 250 feet per mile for 9 miles. Problem solved. Until that endless supply of lumber ended. That's right, they shaved that mountain of its forest like the Onceler harvested the truffle trees. Great. No trees, no industry. But they still had the railroad. So they decided to throw every penny they had into changing the area into a tourist destination. Worked great for the first year. But the dirt bare mountaintop was now prone to flooding. In the second year, a huge flood wiped out the tracks. Just like that, no more Tourstown. The population dwindled until it was down to just 3, the Madison family. Made for easy elections, between the 3 of them, they held every office in town. But the state of Vermont eventually got wind of the situation and disorganized the city in 1937. But don't think for a second that all that time passed without incident. In 1897, opening day of Vermont's very first hunting season, John Harbour goes out with his brother and a family friend to their deer camp in Bickford Hollow. The 3 men are out hunting when a shot rings out and John is heard yelling, "I've been shot!" His brother and friend start searching immediately, but don't find him until 11 a.m. the next day. He's lying dead under a cedar tree with his loaded gun propped up against the tree next to him. Except he wasn't shot there. Someone or something moved him from where he was shot to where he lay under the tree. The tracks are pretty easy to follow, but they're drag marks. He didn't crawl there. He didn't walk there. And if he was shot some distance away, how did his gun end up right next to him? Mr. Harbour's murder is unsolved to this day. And with that little morsel of strangeness, strap on your oxygen tanks because we are diving into the deep end. If you Google Bennington Triangle, chances are that 9 out of 10 results will be talking about a series of 5 disappearances that happened between 1945 and 1950. But here's the kicker. If we go back just 3 more years, starting in 1942, then that number jumps to 10 disappearances in 8 years. The first disappearance isn't generally included in what I'm going to call the famous 5, but I thought it merited some attention, if only for the fact that the person who disappeared was only 13 years old. There isn't really any information about what happened, but on October 11th, 1942, 13-year-old Melvin Hills disappears from the Bennington area. His body is never found. Skip to 1945 and we come to the first of the famous 5, Mitty Rivers. Mitty is a 74-year-old hunting guide who had lived in the area his whole life. In November of 1945, he's guiding a group of 4 friends along the east side of Glastenbury Mountain. As they're on their way back to camp after a long day of hunting, Mitty pulls ahead of the group and says, "I'll meet you up ahead." But they don't find him up ahead. He just vanishes. The only thing they ever find is a bullet lying on the ground next to a creek. So the theory is floated that he must have bent over for a drink from the creek and fell in. Okay, but where's his gun? And where is he? Neither his body nor any of his belongings are ever found. Just 1 year later, on December 1st, 1946, Paula Welden, an 18-year-old sophomore at Bennington College, finishes up her shift in the school cafeteria, goes back to her room, changes her clothes, and tells her roommate, Elizabeth Johnson, "I'm going to go for a hike on the Long Trail." She heads out the door around 2:45 that afternoon, wearing a red coat, jeans, and lightweight tennis shoes. Shortly after that, a guy named Lewis Knapp picks up a hitchhiker just outside the entrance to the college. It's a blonde, college-age girl wearing a red coat. Lewis takes the girl from the college and drops her off on Route 9, almost at the entrance to the Long Trail. The girl thanks him for the ride and starts walking in the direction of the trail. As Paula keeps walking, she passes a few houses where several residents see her walking by. One of them was Ernie Whitman, who warned her that she probably doesn't want to hit the trail now, since it's already late in the afternoon and she's not dressed all that warm. Paula politely thanks him for the advice and keeps walking, never to be seen again. Her roommate reports her missing the next day and a massive search is launched. Unfortunately for investigators, it snowed a few inches during the night. Paula's dad comes rushing into town to help with the search, and classes at Bennington are called off so students can help too. It seems pretty obvious from the start that nobody knows what they're doing. Unfortunately for Paula, that suboptimal start to her case would only continue as the fruitless searches are called off and a more formal investigation begins. Problem is, at this point, Vermont has no state police, so communication and coordination between neighboring cities and counties is less than thorough. Vermont did have a state investigator, Almo Franzoni, who is assigned and takes over the case just a few days in, along with investigators provided by New York and Connecticut. However, they're a little handicapped from the start because no one kept any records of anything they were doing for the first 10 days. Long story short, no trace of Paula is ever found. However, her family and friends do have the meager comfort of knowing that her disappearance is the catalyst for the state of Vermont to form a state police department with the chartered purpose of overseeing all missing person cases for the entire state. Because she was lost, countless other people have been found. Okay, so from that case that to this day is still in the back of the heads of Vermonters, we jump ahead 3 years to 1949. This case is not one of the famous 5, so there's no real information about it, but that winter, 3 hunters all go missing in the Glastenbury area. I'm not sure if they were all together or if it was 3 separate cases, but 3 hunters in one winter is pretty significant. Jump ahead 1 more year and we come to the case of Paul Jepson. On October 12th of 1950, Paul is an 8-year-old boy who's riding in the family truck with his mom. His mom drives to the dump where they house their pigs to move them to a different spot in the dump. It's a 30-minute chore she does every day around 3:30. So she leaves Paul in the truck while she goes and takes care of the pigs. When she returns, Paul is not in the truck. The mom frantically searches for him for a few minutes, but quickly calls the police, who start an immediate search with bloodhounds and the whole works. The police figured he'd be pretty easy to find. He's wearing a bright red jacket, so he should stick out like a sore thumb. But they're wrong. Interesting side note. Remember, Paula had on a red jacket too. To this day, there is a superstition by those in the know that if you're going on to the mountain, don't wear red. The bloodhounds looking for Paul do manage to follow a scent trail down a nearby road for a while, but lose it when they hit a crossroads. Paul's father would later tell reporters that Paul had recently seemed obsessed with the mountains, as if they were somehow calling to him. Hundreds of volunteers searched the area, but Paul was never found. A mere 16 days later, so October 28th, 1950, Freda Langer, her husband Max, and her cousin Herbert Elsner are camping in their cabin near Somerset Reservoir. Freda and her husband have owned this place for 14 years, so I think it's safe to say she's familiar with her environment. That day, the 3 had planned to go on an afternoon hunt, but Max is plagued by a sore knee and tells Freda and Herbert, just go on without me. So they do. And they're not out for very long when Freda slips on a rock and falls into a creek. Now she's going to get cold. So she and Herbert start walking together back towards the cabin so Freda can change her clothes. It's about 3:50 in the afternoon already, and they get to within about 500 feet of the cabin when Freda goes on ahead to change and Herbert stays put just to wait for her. Herbert's waiting and waiting, wondering what in the world could be taking Freda so long. After almost an hour, he gives up and goes back to the cabin, asking Max, what's up with Freda? Max tells him, I haven't seen her. The 2 men do a quick search for her, but Freda is nowhere. But how can that be? She's hunted in this area for 14 years. She was only 500 feet from the cabin. There's no way she got lost. They don't find her that night, so the next day, Max continues to search while Herbert calls the authorities. In the next 2 weeks, 5 separate searches, including dogs and helicopters, are conducted for Freda, with not a trace of her ever found. Until May 12th, 1951, 7 months later. That day, 2 men are fishing about 3 miles from the Langer cabin when they see something odd in the tall reeds. That something odd turns out to be Freda. Her remains are pretty badly decomposed, but the coroner's report states that she died of accidental drowning. Are you kidding me? Freda knew that place like the back of her hand. She's going to wander 3 miles away, fall into a swamp, and drown? Okay. But the biggest kicker is that swamp area had been searched multiple times when she first went missing, and Freda wasn't there. So what happened to Freda that snatched her away when she was almost home and then dumped her body 3 miles away after the searches were over? That's the million-dollar question. Okay, so we're going back a bit for the last story of the famous 5 because I thought this one was so good I had to save it for last. The story of James Tedford. James Tedford is a veteran of World War I. When he comes home from the war, it takes him a while to get back into the groove of life, but he eventually marries his wife Pearl, and they settle down in the Fletchertown area of Franklin, Vermont. And life is good and quiet. Then World War II erupts, and James feels the call to serve his country once more. So he goes off for a second tour of duty, leaving Pearl to wait and pray that he makes it home safely. Thankfully, he does. He returns to Fletchertown and settles back into his routine with Pearl at his side. But this normal life would not stay normal for long. Shortly after his return, James comes home one day to find his house empty. Looking around, he sees that it looks like Pearl's in the middle of making dinner. So he thinks, well, she must have just needed something and just ran out to go get it. So he waits for her. By the time late evening rolls around, James is worried and starts talking to the neighbors and anyone else he can find. He finds out that Pearl had been to the neighborhood Amoco station earlier in the day, but she seemed perfectly normal and happy. But that's all he finds out. When she's not home by the next day, James calls the police. Of course, the first theory is that she left on her own. Pearl is much younger than James, so maybe she just didn't want to be his wife anymore. But no one who knew her said that they noticed any kind of issues. And why leave without leaving a note of any kind, with a partially made dinner in the kitchen? But Pearl was never seen again. Her disappearance wrecks James. He falls into a deep depression, stops seeing all of his family and friends, and sits home alone, staring at the walls. Eventually, in 1947, he moves into the Soldiers' Retirement Home in Bennington, where he maintains his solitary existence and not really making any friends. The only time his monotonous existence ever changes is when occasionally he would take the bus to northern Vermont to visit relatives in St. Albans, which is about an 8-hour bus ride through the Green Mountains. So November of 1949, James boards the bus for one of these visits, maybe a little Turkey Day action, spends a few days with the fam, and boards the bus to go back home on December 1st, which, coincidentally, is 3 years to the day from when Paula Welden went missing. Anyway, he gets on the bus for the routine ride back to Bennington, but he never makes it home. The retirement home knew when he was expected back, so when he doesn't show, they report him missing, and an investigation is launched. The investigation, of course, zeroes in on the bus ride. The bus driver and the 14 other passengers are contacted for information, but the information they provide is not exactly what the investigators expect to hear. According to those on the bus, they all remember seeing James there. They even remember seeing him in his seat when the bus left the station from the last stop before Bennington. And several people remember seeing him sleeping in his seat along the way between those two stops. But when the bus pulls into the Bennington station, James's seat is now empty. His luggage is in the overhead rack, and personal effects, including his wallet with cash inside, are still stowed in his seat area. No one saw him get up from his seat, and the bus did not stop from when they left the last station to when they pulled into the Bennington station. Now, there's no way this guy's getting off of a moving bus without someone noticing. But no trace of James is ever found. Now, if you've been keeping count, that's only 9 of the 10 disappearances. The very last, which again is not part of the famous 5, is the story of Carol Herrick that occurred in 1943. Carol is a 37-year-old hunter who goes out hunting with his cousin Henry Herrick on November 23, 1943, in the forest around West Townsend, roughly 10 miles to the northeast of Bennington. The two get split up. No big deal until Carol doesn't make it back to camp that night. Henry calls the police and a search is started immediately. The searchers find nothing until 3 days later, Henry finds Carol's body, obviously deceased. Carol's face is all black with a few scrapes and scratches on his arms and hands. And the ground all around him is covered in huge tracks that are thought to be bear tracks. His gun is propped against a tree 70 feet from his body with one expended shell on the ground. The coroner's report proves to be a bit surprising. Carol's cause of death is from his lung being punctured by one of his own ribs. He was squeezed to death. The prevailing theory is that Carol was attacked by a bear, that a huge bear came his way, he shot at it, and then put his gun down to go check to see if it was dead. But it wasn't, so it got up and attacked him, somehow wrapping its arms around him and squeezing him to death. Seriously? The Green Mountains do have a decent black bear population, but when's the last time you heard of a bear standing up and hugging someone to death? The term bear hug does not mean that bears can literally hug. And what kind of seasoned hunter is going to think that they brought down a huge bear with just one shot? Does it really make sense that he would not have kept his rifle at the ready, knowing he was probably going to have to shoot it again? And how did he get 70 feet away from his gun? Did Carol try to run, only to be caught and brought down by the bear? Or was he dragged and placed in that spot? Last but not least, how could he have endured an attack so brutal that he was literally squeezed to death, yet have no real cuts or bite marks? Last time I checked, a bear's main method of attack is its claws and its jaws. Yet Carol only has a few scuff marks. So I just gotta ask, was this really a bear? Or was it something else? Perhaps something of a taller, hairier variety. Big feet sightings are not super common on the mountain, but they are far from rare, with the first one on record being all the way back in the early 19th century. A stagecoach full of people is making its way through the mountains around present-day Woodford. It's late, it's dark, and it's raining buckets, causing havoc on the dirt road. Between the rain and the iffy road, the stagecoach driver has to slow down to a crawl and eventually stop the coach completely. The driver jumps down with his lantern to try to get a better look at the condition of the road in front of them when he sees footprints in the mud. And considering how hard the rain is coming down, the fact that he can still see them means they must be pretty fresh. The tracks are widely spaced, telling the driver that whatever made them is huge. The driver yells back to the passengers to see if anyone knows anything about animal tracks. He wants a second opinion. As the passengers start to get out to get a look at these enormous tracks the driver's talking about, the horses start to get spooked. Something is lurking close by that the horses don't like. As the driver is trying to calm the horses, something huge smashes into the side of the stagecoach. Whoever's left in the coach quickly scrambles out into the pouring rain, terrified as whatever it is lurking in the dark continues to bash the side of the stagecoach until it finally topples over onto its side. The passengers huddle up in the driving rain, scared out of their minds, searching the dark to try to figure out what on earth could push over their heavy stagecoach. And they see it, or at least part of it. They can see its eyes, and based on where those eyes are, they estimate the height of the creature to be roughly 8 feet tall. And this is the birth of what today is known as the Bennington Monster. Just a little side note. While almost all of the descriptions I read about the Bennington Monster describe a Bigfoot-like creature, I did find one place that described the Bennington Monster as something that has the body of a large cat and a lizard head with wings. stands between 5 and 7 feet tall, and has a bone-chilling, mountain-reverberating scream. Huh, that's just slightly different. So, which is the true Bennington monster? I have no idea. Maybe they'll have to cage match it someday to determine the winner of the title. Now, of course, there are plenty of explanations for lots of these events. Hunters will be the first to tell you that getting hit by the four winds on the top of Glastenbury Mountain is a very disorienting experience that can quickly set you on the wrong path and get you lost. But getting lost does not equate to vanishing without a trace. And there were certainly plenty of people theorizing that the fate of the famous 5, actually 10, must have been the responsibility of a serial killer. But serial killers usually have certain profiles of victims. These 10 people who vanished in those 8 years are male and female, young and old, and at least one of them was riding on a bus, which of course naturally leads us to explanations of a more unearthly kind. Look at James Tedford, the bus rider. Even the popular portal theory doesn't work for him since he was on a moving bus. About the only thing that does make sense is being snatched by a UFO. And while, according to the Manchester Journal, Vermont is the second highest state for UFO sightings per capita, when you look at the incident tracking data at the National UFO Reporting Center, or NUFORC, there isn't any more sightings in the Bennington Triangle area than there are in the rest of the state. And while the city of Bennington certainly has its share of NUFORC reports, they mainly consist of sightings of odd lights in the sky. Not super strange and mysterious enough for a channel that reports on the strange and mysterious. However, I did find this report that I find rather intriguing from northern Vermont. I know, not our target area for today, but it's still a great encounter. Sometime in the 1970s, a man who coincidentally grew up in the Green Mountains, but now lives in Burlington, works as a police officer in Montpelier. Every morning, he would make the 30-mile drive from Burlington to Montpelier and then drive back to Burlington again at night. This one particular night, he's driving along and sees what looks to be a construction project going on off the side of the road on a small mountain. Now, driving this road every day, he thought he knew pretty much every construction project that existed on this route. But he doesn't remember this one. As he's driving, he comes up on a spot where half a dozen other people have stopped to see what's going on. So he stops as well. He can see a huge, dark shape, the mountain, covered in bright lights. He can't hear anything over the sound of the highway, so if there's any sound, it's really low. The air is slightly foggy, so the bright lights make it hard to make anything else out. But this is October, so he figures that there must be a new ski resort trying to hurry and get construction done in time for this year's ski season. Okay, whatever. He gets in his car and he heads home. The next day, curious to see in the daylight just what this massive construction project actually is, he stops on his way to work at the same mile marker he had stopped at the night before. There is no mountain. He looks around and knows for a fact that he's standing in the same place he was standing just the night before, but there's nothing there. To this day, he insists what he saw was a giant UFO that landed in rural Vermont. Okay, so far we have Bigfoot in the 1800s, missing 411s in the 1940s, and UFOs in the 1970s. So, is there still weirdness going on today? There is. One account comes from Chad Abramovich, creator of the Obscure Vermont website, who wrote a post entitled The Vanished Town of Glastenbury and the Bennington Triangle. In that post, Chad, the self-described cartography buff and skeptic, took a trip a few years ago with some friends on a beautiful sunny July day to the once town of Glastenbury to see the ruins of the ghost town for himself. Based on Chad's age, I'm thinking this was probably around the early 2000s. They travel in a pickup truck up the bumpy forest road and find what's left of the town, mainly old cellar foundations hidden under years of tall grass and trees. As they're enjoying their post-urban exploration, that beautiful July day quickly turns into a fierce thunderstorm with torrential rain. They decide to wait it out for a while until it dawns on them that if the rain washes out the road, they're stuck there. So they carefully make their way back down the mountain through the pouring rain until they make it back to the flats, only to discover that once they're off the mountain, everything is bone dry. They asked some people in the area if they had rain or if they saw the storm roll by. No one in the town had seen a thing. Now, of course, this story is pretty anecdotal, but couple that with this next story, now we're getting somewhere. In 2008, Robert Singley, who's a music composition teacher at Bennington College, decides to take a day hike up Bald Mountain to get some inspiration for his new string quartet composition he's working on. He parks his car, hikes a ways up the mountain, works for a while, eats some lunch, checks out some of the scenery, and decides it's probably time to head home. And with all of this put together, he's about 3 miles from his car. He starts walking east, back down the same trail toward his car. After about 4 or 5 miles, dawns on him that he should have gotten there by now. As his panic starts to wake up at the thought that he might be lost, Robert says, everything like crescendoed into this weird sort of dizzying confusion. It just suddenly got dark, and then it was like, where am I? What's going on? I was totally lost. Making matters worse, a fog rolls in, making the growing dark even darker. But he's an experienced hiker, so he quells the panic as much as he can and takes stock of his situation. His shorts are not ideal for the overnight temperatures, but he's wearing a long-sleeve shirt with a wool sweater, a raincoat, and a winter hat and mittens. But since this was just supposed to be a day hike that he had done many times before, he did not have his compass or a GPS or even a watch. And when he fishes into his backpack for his headlamp, it's broken. Robert is stuck. Knowing he's going to have to make a stand right where he is until morning, he finds a maple tree that, according to him, is expelling some kind of weird energy. Drawn to that energy, he hunkers down and tries to get some rest. But the wet and the cold kind of shoots that idea. So he decides to make a fire to keep warm. And as he's trying to find firewood in the dark, he keeps finding these large animal bones instead. Creepy. He finally finds some wood, and with his matches and some paper from his composition book, I hope they were the blank pages, he's able to get a fire going and keep warm through the unusually quiet night. Once it's light enough, Robert starts walking in the direction he thinks his car is. But after 3 or 4 miles, he hits a sign letting him know that he's no longer on Bald Mountain. He's now almost at the top of Glastenbury Mountain. He turns around, retracing his steps to the maple tree where he should be able to retrace his steps from the night before to pick up the trail that he should have taken. But the trail back to familiar territory looks strangely unfamiliar, with debris on the trail that he certainly would remember crossing. By 11:30 that morning, Robert is found by Vermont State Police. Thanks to Paula. His final thoughts on the whole affair? Robert says, either I took a side trail, which doesn't make sense, or something weird happened. So if you made it this far into the episode, I have saved the best legend for last. The legend of the pigman of Northfield. Northfield is a little north of our Bennington Triangle area, but still within the greater weirdness of the Green Mountains. The story goes that on Halloween of 1951, a 17-year-old boy named Sam Harris ventures into the woods armed with a basket of eggs, planning on a night of Halloween mayhem. But Sam never comes out of those woods. Search parties are formed, the woods are searched, but no sign of Sam is ever found. As time rolls on, a dark rumor starts circulating that Sam has been possessed by the devil himself, who turned him into a grotesque, pig-like creature. The smoke of the rumor slowly turns into fire as occasional sightings of the creature begin to spread through town. It's described as humanoid with a body covered in long white hair, a face that looks eerily like a pig, and hands with long claws. And it makes grunting and squealing sounds that send shivers down the spines of even the most stoic of eyewitnesses. Most of the sightings occur close to a place called the Devil's Washbowl, known for its caves, waterfalls, and dark, ominous, tangled woods. And as warnings of the creature continue to spread, more and more people start exploring the Devil's Washbowl, looking for any evidence of its existence. What they find only makes things worse. They find piles of animal bones in the caves, including pig bones. And just so you know, Vermont is not known for its wild boar. So the pigs must have come from area farms. Is Pigman stealing livestock? Once the news gets out that something is actually living in the caves of the Devil's Washbowl and stealing livestock, people start avoiding the area as much as possible, especially around Halloween. But to this day, there are plenty of people out there who will swear to seeing this monster with their own eyes. In the 1970s, Ethan is camping in the Devil's Washbowl with some friends. They wake up in the middle of the night to hear strange noises coming from deeper in the woods. They all thought it must be just regular woods at night sounds. But the noises get closer and louder. The campers start to feel very uneasy. They still have a fire going, which is throwing a little light into the woods. Everyone is now awake and watching. They see something moving just at the edge of the firelight, and they will never forget what they see. It is a half man, half animal, covered in white fur, with a half human, half pig face. The creature lets out an ear-piercing squeal and charges at the campers, who run terrified into the night. In 1971, a Northfield farmer hears some strange noises in his backyard one night. He turns on his outside light and looks through the kitchen window, expecting to see a raccoon or some other nocturnal animal running away from the light. But that's not what he sees. Instead, lurking at the edge of the glow cast by the yard light, the farmer sees a figure the size of a full-grown man with a body covered in white hair with the face of a pig. He only sees it for a few seconds before the creature runs away. But just a few days later, there's a dance at the local high school. Some kids are hanging out in the parking lot when they see the same pig-faced, white-haired creature seen by the farmer. And apparently, both parties to the interaction must have been startled because everyone turned and ran away. How creepy is that? Now, one final note to all of our dogman lovers out there. Much to my chagrin, Vermont appears to be a dogman-free state, at least right now. There are no dogman encounters anywhere close to Vermont posted on either North American Dogman Project or dogmanencounters.com. Nor could I find any stories anywhere else. I just want you to know I tried. So what do you think? Is the Bennington Triangle a place that you would run to or run away from? Special thanks to the InBetweeners who brought this story to my attention. I'd never heard of it and certainly wasn't aware of how crazy it is. Also, it came to my attention that the Bennington Triangle is awfully similar to the Bridgewater Triangle, just a hop skipping away in Massachusetts. So I would say there's a pretty good possibility we will be visiting that weirdness in a future episode. Thanks for watching. I'm Carol Ann, and if you are not yet ready to disembark from this creepy train, then click right here for more strange and unexplained craziness. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.